Us again. Today's guest is a very inspiring woman, and her name is Pam Costain. Only some of her roles were that for 14 years, she was executive director of the Resources Center of the American and International Human Rights Organization. In 2003, she helped found Wellstone Action, an organization dedicated to promoting civic engagement, where she served as the director of education and training. She has extensive experience in public education, reform, school and community partnerships, parent engagement, and school finance. As I said in the beginning, these are just some of her life tasks, if I could say like that. And it's my great pleasure that she's my guest today. Thank you for being here with me. And I want to start our conversation with one of your sentences that inspired me personally. I will read that. I feel I have become a very intentional builder of a new generation of leaders. What we strive for in Bosnia is as many women in positions as it is possible, but it's equally important that we have as many women as is possible who will support those who choose to take that path. We need those who will know how to build a true leaders. So first question is, why was it important to you to focus on intentionally building leaders?
Well, I guess it's sort of obvious to say we all have only one life and we have a limited time to contribute to our society and to our beliefs. And so we can't do that alone. I feel that very strongly. And so from the time I was very young until now, I've tried to focus on sharing leadership and building up the leadership of others, because that is really truly how we have collective power. So, but it's even more important to me now because I just had my 71st birthday. And so I'm an older woman, and it's very clear to me that unless I pass on skills and power and position to younger women, then we cannot advance. I think too often older people hold on to their positions, and it's really the opposite of what we need to do. We need to build the capacity of everyone to participate. And I think women are particularly in a position to do that because we know what it is to be without power, and we know what it is to be watching powerful people act and be left out. And so when women have leadership roles, I think it's really important that we use every ounce of our energy to make sure that leadership is shared.
But how do you, I will say like this, intentionally build leaders?
Right. So I think the first thing is, I believe a good leader is a good listener. Good leaders don't talk all the time. They listen to other people. They learn from other people. They enable themselves to change. And so the first thing I would say is it's critical to be a good listener. It's important to allow other people to have the limelight, that is to, be in front, so that we don't always have to be the person in front. We can be the person in the back. Even if we are the positional leader, we can actively encourage people to be the speaker, the writer, the spokesperson, that kind of thing. So that's another way to do it. I think it's also important to just talk with other women about what their strengths and their weaknesses might be, and help them to both identify their strengths and work on the things that they need to improve. So there's an intentionality about being a mentor that I think is really important for leaders, but especially women leaders.
When we are speaking about women on leadership positions, I would allow myself to say we are natural leaders in everyday life, but still we have some kind of, we are frightened from some kind of things. What you saw in women as their maybe biggest fright when we are speaking about political positions, political roles, leadership roles?
Well, we know here in the United States from research that women don't feel that they should run for political office as easily as men do. There's been research that shows that an inexperienced man feels that they can run for political office over a very highly experienced woman. And so part of that is internal to women. We need to get over the sense that we are less than, that we're not as capable, or that we have to have a resume that's a mile long in order to, run for political office. I ran for school board in my city. And one of the things I realized running for political office is, the other people who run are no more smart than I am. They just decided to run. And I would say that that's true up and down, the level of politics. It's not that people are absolutely brilliant or talented or experienced. It's they decided to run. They decided to put themselves forward, to take the risks and rewards of that. And when they did that, then they could claim leadership. But women tend to moderate ourselves too much. We tend to hold back too much and defer to others, in particular men. And we just have to stop it, because I believe in general, not in every specific case, women can be better leaders than men, more collaborative, more inclusive, more democratic. And so I think it's really important for women to just be bold and take that step.
Yes. Although I'm focused on women through these interviews, I cannot help but refer to one obviously very important man. Many of women that I interviewed during this series of interviews mentioned Senator Paul Wellstone with, I would say, deep, deep, deep respect. A good leader is a good leader, and regardless of a gender. Why was he such an important and good leader as an inspiration to many?
Well, first, let me just say just a little bit more about Paul Wellstone. Paul Wellstone began his career as a college professor, and so he was deeply committed to students and to student leadership. But he also believed in social movements, social organizing, but he also taught that it's not sufficient to have a social movement if you don't also have political power. So he was very strategic about how he moved. But the reason he's so important as an individual is because being a leader was never about Paul. It was about the good of the community. And if I could say one message to your audience, it's that it's not about us as leaders. It's about what's good for the community. And Paul embodied that. So you would go to a meeting with Paul, and instead of calling attention to himself, he would start pointing around the room at all the wonderful things other people were doing or had done. He celebrated other people. He built them up. He held them up. So first of all, he was just very inclusive. He was non-egotistical. He was very authentic. He wasn't playing politics. He believed politics was the way to improve people's lives. And so he practiced politics in a way that was very inclusive and practical. Again, not about him, because he really truly believed that one person doesn't make change, but collectively people make change. He was incredibly powerful. He also, and I think this is quite important, believed that there was great joy in politics, great joy in public life and public service, and he exuded that joy. So it's not doom and gloom and all the things that are wrong, but is what we can do together to make life better for the most people in our community. And there is joy in doing that if you celebrate community.
You worked with Senator Wellstone from the time you came out of college, and you work on his campaign as you help many other people. From your experience, how do you build quality campaigns, and how do you gain the trust of community that you're the right choice for them? What would you say?
I think that's such an important question, and here's my answer. If you are rooted in community, if you already have strong experience in a community, you are known, you have paid your dues in community work, you will be a better leader. So what we don't need any more of is people who we say just swoop down from above, think they've got all the answers and at the last minute tell people, vote for me, vote for me. The best leaders are rooted in their communities. They have strong relationships. They know who the organic leaders are and who the kind of fake leaders are. And they build the capacity of community. So what I learned very much from Paul Wellstone and the only people I support now in politics is those people who are rooted in community, who really practice humility, but also build up others. Because if we just come in at the last minute and ask people or communities for a vote, we might get it. It's a very transactional way to do politics, but we won't transform our society. The way we transform society is through long-term relationships where people operate collectively to create change. And that's the kind of politician I look for. So there's an authenticity that I find in those people that is, it makes more difference than almost anything.
Why do you think we still have a global underrepresentation of women in key politics position?
Well, I could give you a very glib answer, which is that we live in patriarchy. We live in patriarchal societies, whether or not we live in rich countries like the United States or very poor countries or somewhere in between. We still live in patriarchal societies where, and these are, hundreds, thousands of years old, and the traditions are embedded for a very long time. And so it takes a great deal of work and patience to move out of that. I think it's important for people to recover their own histories, because when we uncover our own histories, I think we see the leadership of women. And I think it's really important to see invisible work that is done by women to hold societies together, to hold communities together. So I think it's really difficult everywhere. It's embarrassing to live in the United States and still have poor representation in our Congress, poor representation in our business community. So it's not exclusive to less developed countries. On the other hand, I have seen in my lifetime tremendous change, absolutely tremendous, phenomenal change. And so it can be done. It's being done here, and it can be done around the world.
Yes, I also want to believe in that, and that is the reason why I'm doing all of this. But as a peace activist, you were part of anti-Iraq war rally, and you have been a part of native rights and education for all. What are the reasons for being part of these issues? And I must admit, it seems to me that being a part of these, for example, this rally, it's very brave. Do you see that as maybe I see that?
The first time I participated in a demonstration, which was 50 years ago, or more than that, it was very brave. But the more I did it, the more I did not feel it was brave. I just thought it was my obligation. I think the first time we step out of our roles or out of our comfort zone or out of what people expect of us, then it does cause it. There's a need to be brave, but I don't feel it's brave. I feel like it's the only way I can live my life. So I've done a lot of things. Some of them are protests and demonstrations. I think it's important that we call authority to account. Some of them are building institutions, both alternative institutions and regular institutions. Some of it is educating and organizing people. So I think all of those things are important. I think we can't rely simply on protests to make change, but nor can we rely simply on, trying to reform an institution. We need all of it. And at some points in my life, I've been more inclined to protest. Other times I've been more inclined to the difficult work of changing institutions from the inside. And sometimes I have worked to build alternative institutions, food cooperatives or women's organizations or whatever. what I want to be sure is that we don't judge people where they choose to put their energy, but we see it all as a part of a whole, so that one is not necessarily better than the other, and different times require different tactics. So yes, I have protested wars. I have a history of protesting U.S. involvement in bad foreign ventures around the world. But I also feel very strongly about the rights of Native people in my own country. And so I work there. And then I have worked for human rights. So I guess the other thing I'm trying to say is whether or not we work with a global focus or a local focus, we are contributing. And we need to practice valuing each of those perspectives. Again, so it's not that if she works on international human rights and she works on running for parliament, that those are to be judged differently. Everybody does what they can where they are. And I think that's the most important thing.
To be a part of protests, to be an activist, sometimes in a different time periods, it's not popular. And how was it hard to live your life in maybe society that don't support you or don't understand you, and still knowing that it's obligations to be a part of these protests of activism and things like that?
But one thing, I have a lot of criticisms of my own government, but one thing I will say is I deeply value the right to protest, the right to free speech, the right to say what we think, and to call those in power to account. So I feel both honored to live in a country where democratic values are practiced and where they are constantly threatened. They could go away in a minute. And so I do believe that we can't take protest for granted. We have to really strengthen and fortify the institutions that allow a variety of opinions to be present in a society and to allow protest. But I also believe that that part of that is practicing in our own lives respect for other people too, and respect for differences, and the ability to have a civil conversation about how to proceed to solve problems in our society. So I think it both starts with us and it is part of protest, but I think we must keep open the space for protest. And, as somebody who's no longer young, but who was young once, the young people lead us in protest. They have the energy, they have the idealism, they have the enthusiasm. And so I really appreciate the fact that in almost every society, it's young people who open up the space, push the politicians, and then the politicians hopefully have to respond.
And for the end, for all the women who are watching us at this particular moment and thinking whether to engage politically in a way, even run for office or just engage politically, what would you say to them?
I would say, first and foremost, believe in yourself. Again, you are as smart, as talented, as skilled, as experienced as anybody else out there. And if you have deficits in those areas, learn them. You can learn to be a better speaker. You can learn to be a better writer. You can learn to be a better policy analyst, but don't underestimate yourself. That's the first thing I'd say to all women. And secondly, I would say lean on other women for support. Build networks of sisterhood where people are bucking each other up to do hard things. The third thing is to know that public life is very difficult for families. And so you need to have the support of your family to do it. It's very, very hard to be a public person without family support. It could be parents, it could be spouse or friends or whatever. But increasingly, public life can be very ugly and very mean. And so one has to have a lot of strength internally to do it. And the way you do that is to build your support system. And then the other thing is to know that, you can be part of history. You can make history. History is made by people who decide to act. And so what I would say to all women thinking about whether or not it's political leadership or other kinds of leadership, do it. You'll make mistakes. Mistakes is how we learn, but do those things and you will grow and you will benefit your society.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for your time. Thank you for your shared knowledge and experience. And it's a privilege to have you today with me.
Well, it's a privilege to be talking with you. I'm so happy. And I think building global networks is really an important thing. We need to work locally and globally if we're going to solve the world's problems. So thank you.